Sports Report. I'm Ramon Scott, and I'm joined by EastCountySports.com's Dave Dickens. Dave, we're out here at sponsor Retro Sports in La Mesa, going over things with Matt Atkinson, get some work done for the upcoming league season. And we're just a week away from some league games starting, 2 weeks away from really getting into the swing of things. But one more serious week of non-league games this week, some real blockbusters. The St. Augustine Saints are going to travel to meet the Helix Highlanders. The 8th-ranked Highlanders will finally get a chance to prove their respected ranking despite their 1-3 record when they host 6th-ranked St. Augustine on Friday night. The return of Fato Noah last week against Cathedral Catholic certainly enhances the Highlanders' chances against the red-hot Saints. Noah had 25 carries in his return from a concussion, and he had 221 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dave, Helix was certainly up to the task at the line of scrimmage against Cathedral, but ultimately the Dons' special teams determined the outcome. A couple of block punts, they made a field goal in the fourth quarter. Helix led the Dons midway through the fourth, but the Dons won the game 31-20.
Yeah, I think it's kind of unfortunate the way that works too, because that, as we spoke about last week, that ultimately removes them from the open division contention, and that's very unfortunate for the Highlanders. As the Dons will move on and they'll get to compete for that open division. However, I mean, I think that Helix will be just as good defending in the D1, and they'll be more than prepared. But again, it's sorry to hear for such a tough team that has so much talent, and for them to have to swallow one like that's not too nice.
Well, the rankings didn't get affected too much. Talking about the official computer rankings, Helix is still 6th in the county power rankings, while the Saints are 4th. However, I think Helix, with this game at home, it makes them expected to win by just a little bit in my eyes. Of course, Helix now with Delshawn Traylor as the quarterback. Daniel Lamont is on the sidelines currently with an injury. He's got wide receiver Chris Rivera. Also the Highlander defense, Michael Shawcroft, Jagger Giles. The Saints blanked a pretty decent Otay Ranch team, and they're just flat out on fire right now. They're led by the Pangia brothers on the line of scrimmage, and running back Byron Cardwell, 453 yards so far, and wide receiver Sam Scaife. Saints quarterback Angelo Peraza looks for tight end Michael Embachir. The Scotties lead this series 7-2, including a win last season and in 2015 CIF championship game 44-30. The team split back in 2003-2004. Dave, I've got the Highlanders winning this one by a point.
Yeah, I think that Helix, I think they're going to really have to step up maybe at the defensive side of the ball and maybe win the turnover battle. If they can create some turnovers, Shawcroft can have a couple more of those fantastic picks, and maybe toss one to the left or the right of them and feed one into the end zone. However they do it, they definitely need to create a good pass rush and ultimately pressure that quarterback. And I got Helix getting out of this funk and stepping up and starting to win the remaining games. And I got Helix by a touchdown.
The Otay Ranchers are going to take on the Steel Canyon Cougars. The computers rank this one very closely as both teams sit near the top 10, right about 10 and 11 in the power rankings. Steel's 11th and Otay's 10th. We had Nathan Barnett on this week in our studio, and he scored 4 touchdowns, giving him 7 rushing scores on the season. One also mentioned Antoine Walker. He opened the game last week with a 70-yard touchdown return. Kenneth Watson had 150 yards rushing this season, and Chance Johnson has 6 receptions. The Cougars, we got a chance to meet Nathan, and a good kid, and it looks like the Cougars are ready to start to show what they're made of.
Yeah, we definitely got an insight from their quarterback and kind of how he came up and his change of scenery and getting acclimated, if you will, to the Steel Canyon Cougar culture. I think he's definitely a good fit and watched enough film of Fish and definitely knows what Coach Longerbone expects. And I think that maybe that is going to be the secret in this game. I think possibly that we're going to go to the air a couple of times. And as we've seen some of his older footage when he played in Jersey, he definitely has the arm strength, and that could be definitely the secret weapon against the Otay Ranch team, which I know the teams have changed on roster-wise, but I was at that game last season at Otay Ranch and came down to the one of the last plays, and Wish they probably had that tight end in Mikkel and having a strip like that and go on to win at Otay. But I think we'll see the same thing here. It'll be a close one. Maybe not as high scoring, but definitely I see Steele Canning coming out with the field goal to win this.
Yeah, last year's game was 14-13, which was the same score as their that competitive game they played with Brawley. But Otay won back 33-14 at Steele in 2016. Don't forget about Cougars senior Ian Miller. He had 2 sacks last week. Cameron Ewert had an interception in the win over Bonita Vista. Otay's losses were to top 5 teams, Saints and San Marcos. And so we talked with Nathan about quarterback Puka Stewart. He has 550 total yards this season. Running back Noah Isley averaging 7.5 yards per carry. Well, Rancho Verde is going to come in and make a surprise visit to the Grossmont Foothillers. Grossmont and Coach Carlo did themselves no favors scheduling Rancho Verde of Morena Valley just 2 weeks after a previous opponent backed out, forcing the Foothillers into that untimely bye. I think it really put them into a funk heading into the Eastlake game. They had an unexpected week to prepare, if you will, or rest. And it affected them, I think, against Eastlake. The Foothillers were shut out. Eastlake, no doubt, is a good team, a rapid riser in the top 10 right now. But I would think that Grossmont wouldn't have trouble getting up for this game. The problem is the challenge that the Mustangs present.
Yeah, and as I understand, looking at the wins that they have posted, and also they did some serious damage to that Bonita Vista team, from what I understand. And not to mention, I just think that they just have their work cut out for them on this one. But after that one, they just lost last week over there to Eastlake. I think the defense did play well. It was just unfortunate that that running game was working so well, and that offensive line was able to push that defensive line just enough to get into the end zone. Not real big plays, with the exception of a few. But I definitely think that the Hillers can possibly turn this one around, but they are going against an undefeated team at that as well.
Yeah.
So, but this one is I don't want to say it's a must-win, but they definitely need to win this one to get back up into the power rankings.
Now, the Mustangs are out of the Ivy League in the Southern Section. They're 3-0, as you mentioned. They're ranked 38th in the state. They're also ranked second in the Southern Section's Division II. So this will be the toughest opponent the Hillers have faced all season. The Mustangs are a ball control-oriented team with senior 2-star running back Xavier Uborgi, a Sacramento State commit. The Stangs average almost 10 yards per carry as a team. I want to mention, last week you mentioned the Hillers defense. Chris Alba had 9 solo stops. There should be plenty of work to go around on Friday night. I want to mention on the offense, Zach Ferris. He's actually emerging now as one of the best possession receivers in the entire county. He had 7 catches in the game against Eastlake. I think it could play to the Hillers' advantage that RV High has taken on this game so late. And Grossmont is grateful to have the opponent, but I think this will only close the margin of victory. I've got Rancho Verde by a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah, I think Grossmont definitely has their work cut out for them, but if they have a really good practice, and I think that they're really thinking they need a revenge game, and if there is one that they can take care of, maybe this is the one to get it back onto an even keel and take them into league and give them a little more, just give them more of an edge.
Sure. Dave, it's homecoming at Granite Hills High School this week as Hilltop Lancers are going to visit Valley Stadium to take on the 3-0 Eagles. The Eagles are going to have to come back down to earth quickly after last week's thrilling road victory in the North County. Justin McElligott was McElligott with his game-winning field goal last week. Everybody rushed out there, a big emotional victory overtime to beat Westview. That game was ruled by the defenses, and appropriately, the first score of the game came from a touchdown by Ethan Bishop on an interception return. Bailey Christian deflected it. Ethan caught it, ran it in 53 yards to lead midway through the fourth quarter. Westview eventually sent the game into overtime, but McElligott, as I like to call him, won it after the Wolverines had scored. Coach Westling and Hilltop, they love to throw the ball, which doesn't seem like the best of game plans going against this Eagle defense right now.
This is going to be another one of those that the defense comes up big, but let's not forget the offense. Prior to that, against Mount Carmel, they really opened up that running game, and that also created good passing lanes for Chris Olstring, and I think that a lot of people are still underestimating and underranking the Eagles. They've had some close ones, but they are wins, and they are still on top of the Hills League. Any way you look at it, they're on top of some pretty good squads.
They're almost all wins at this point, Dave. 11 of the last 12 games have been Eagle victories, so I've got the Eagles winning this one comfortably.
Yeah, I definitely think that this one will be well in hand, and I'm going to say the Eagles by 3 touchdowns.
Dave, the Santana Sultans are going to host the Vincent Memorial team coming in from the Imperial Valley. The Scots would appear to be evenly matched with the Sultans going into this one. But I don't think that the rankings account for some of those injury problems that we talked about with Colton Snipes of the Sultans this week. The Sultans got a great opponent to try to work things out last week, sans their quarterback and star running back / linebacker. They're missing 2 key players, but Sean Iverson filled in admirably at quarterback and went 7 for 8 passing with 3 touchdowns. So how about that? They beat Claremont handily.
Absolutely, and it was really nice to have Colton come sit down with us and get to know the Sultans a little better internally, if you will. Especially with, I mean, he's played just about every position on the field. I looked at some of those statistics, and I think he even had a carry, nothing big, but had a carry as a running back. Catch as a receiver, and we all know how important he is on the special teams, and he's been perfect on the PATs and a couple of field goals. So I think that he's one of the plethora of great players on that team still. So Iverson has stepped up. Let's not forget about Jared Forster. And I mean, he's good on both sides of the ball. He's been a great receiver. And we're talking about great receivers. How about Randy Smith?
Sure.
Randy Smith has been spectacular this season. The go-to guy for whoever's behind center. I think that the Sultans last year, they played a close one. It was out in the desert. I think I got this week, same thing. I think that the Sultans, injured or not, I think they will take care of Vincent Memorial by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, with Smith and Chaz Baker, both of whom had touchdown receptions last week. We talk about the Vincent Memorial Scots. They're the top-ranked team in Division 5, and that's a division that includes the Red Hawks and Holtville. So we have talked about the Mountain Empire chances of winning the Manzanita. This is the favorite of the Manzanita League right now, the Vincent Memorial Scots. Last year, you mentioned that game. It was 50-43, and the research team did this. It was the highest scoring game in Santana history last year. The 50-43 game. They met at the neutral field at Southwest High. Interestingly, Vincent Memorial came into that game 4-0, and they were also number 1 in Division 5 at that time. Brooks Mouton rushed for 170 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game last year, so I think they might have the formula to beat the Scots. The Sultans have an impressive all-time record against Imperial Valley Schools of 13-6-1, but I'm going to say that Santana's going to win a close one. I've got them by a couple of points. Well, an intriguing matchup as the Imperial Tigers come to Spring Valley to face off with the big play passing of the Mount McGill Matadors. Who thought we'd be saying that, Dave, heading into the season? While the computers seem to favor Imperial, I have Mount McGill as a stock already on the rise with the emergence of live-armed quarterback sophomore J.D. Laverdier and his long-range target Jaheim Allen, who had 2 touchdown receptions against Santa Fe Christian. This should be a good matchup in the secondary as Imperial has 10 interceptions so far this season. The Tigers have their own receiving threat in junior Joey Ramos, who has 22 receptions so far, and their senior quarterback Santiago De La Torre has over 800 yards of total offense. Imperial is 2-2 this year, and they lost at home against Valley Center last week. The Tigers also shut out Holtville 46-0.
Yeah, I think that's going to be that is an impressive thing to do by shutting out the Tigers. But I also think that Mount McGill is. How did they put it at the beginning of the season? Trust the system. Troy Starr, head coach, has done a phenomenal job with the numbers that they have, and they're buying into what he's selling. So I definitely think that Mount McGill is on the rise, and I think there may be quite a few naysayers, but they got definitely the best person in place to take them to the next level. I think they can open up those passing lanes and give JD some time. I think that Mount McGill could very well have an upset. And then I will even go out on a limb and I seem to be doing pretty well. Like you said, we haven't counted up the wins and losses between the two of us, but I'm going to definitely go out on another upset, and I'm going to say Mount McGill by 3.
Well, Mount McGill won at Imperial last year, 20-14. Larry Hazagiri caught a touchdown pass in that one, so I think they're going to grab the victory in a close one here at home. The Coronado Islanders are going to travel out to Pine Valley to take on the Mountain Empire Redhawks, and that'll be a great game as a pair of 3-1 teams square off, and the computers rate it just as closely. They're right next to each other in the computer's power rankings. Dave, the Redhawks have recorded 3 consecutive shutouts after last week's 20-0 win in Yermo over Silver Valley. Sophomore Efren Penuelas registered a couple of sacks, and Cameron Will had 11 tackles. Seniors Marquise Davis and Ryan Sawyer combined for 9 receptions. Esteban Castillo rushed for a touchdown. The Redhawks, the Islanders, this is going to be a game.
Yeah, the Redhawks definitely are red hot, and that is an absolute fact. I mean, to be beating all these teams, whether the quality of the team or not, they're putting up offensive numbers that are unheard of for Mountain Empire. Nothing to take away from them in prior years, but with so many people going both ways, and the amount of players that they have on that team, if there's any injury, that could change things. For them to remain healthy thus far, even through the season, we didn't mention also the always sure-handed Dallas Prince. He can always come up and be big on both sides, whether it be at safety or wide receiver. And Hydorn's been great with his legs and with his arm. I just think they have too many weapons. I know that Coronado's got quite a few wins, including a unfortunate big win over El Cajon Valley, putting up 76 points. But I think that they're going to actually meet somebody that is definitely not going to let them put up a big score like that. They have a great defense with Cameron Will leading the attack. I mean, he's an absolute beast, and you're saying with the newcomer as well. So I think that it's definitely going to be a close one. I'm going to say once again, though, maybe not a shutout, but I'm going to give Mountain Empire the benefit of the doubt, and that they're going to come out on top by 7 points.
Yeah, and you mentioned the victories for the Islanders. They also beat Maranatha Christian to open the season, but the Islanders did suffer their first loss last week at the hands of Mar Vista on the road, 34-7. Coach Kurt Hines' team is led by junior quarterback Fulton Maldonado and senior defender Bryce Alexander. This is the first meeting between these two teams since 1991, but Dave, get this, the series started in 1926 between Coronado and Mountain Empire. How did they get off the island? They go all the way down through the Strand. Wasn't even called the Silver Strand back then. Anyways, the series started in 1926, and the Islanders lead this series 8-1. Mountain Empire's only win was in 1985, 14-10. I will note that Coronado beat Mountain Empire in 1931, 74-0. So the Redhawks have revenge on their mind. Nearly 80 years of revenge on their mind. I got the Redhawks by a field goal.
Yeah, I think Coach Rollins and Coach Van will definitely definitely be chomping at the bit, and I'm sure they brought the history out before we did. And you know, another thing that they have going for them is they got all these shutouts and they got all this excitement. I mean, this could be another record. You know, they're breaking all these school records and just having a sensational season. Another example of buying into the coaching staff and what they're selling. Let's not forget too that this is the first graduating class under Coach Van too, so he's been molding most of these kids since they were sophomores. So this is a huge season. This is a huge game as well, and I think it has so many implications. And I think the Redhawks by 7.
Dave, the 7th-ranked Eastlake Titans are looking for respect after 3 straight victories following a season-opening loss, 13-0 to Torrey Pines. They're going to come in and take on the Valhalla Norsemen on Friday night. Eastlake is 5th in the computer power rankings, but the pollsters actually have them a couple of notches lower, and the Titans were impressive. We talked about the win over Grossmont last week. The Titans have over 1,000 yards rushing in their first 4 games, and they're going to be a busy night on offense, a busy night on defense for the Valhalla Norsemen. The Eastlake defense offense limited Grossmont to just 5 first downs last week and 115 yards. They have star senior middle linebacker Josh McCurdy. The Norsemen are going to learn a lot from this test and many others down the road. They've got a tough schedule coming up, including Helix, Grossmont, Steel Canyon. But I will say the Norsemen led at halftime in that game against Mount Miguel 2 weeks ago. 25-13 they ended up losing, but Luke Pillsbury connected with Zach Larson on offense, and midway through the second quarter, Valhalla led the Matadors, and then they were winning 7-6 at intermission. So the Braves are going to travel to Sweetwater to take on fellow winless team, the Red Devils. El Cajon Valley senior Brandon Robinson has 113 yards receiving this season, including a nice 38-yard play last week. And sophomores Joe Malone and Demarius Hyde have both rushed for over 100 yards this season, and Darrell Taylor had a sack last week for the Braves. The Red Devils won last season, but the Braves were later awarded a forfeit and won that game. That made the series all-time 3-3 since 2008. They did play several times, but way back 1960 or earlier, and the Sweetwater used to pretty much run the roost over the Braves.
Yeah, I think for the Braves, after talking to Coach Osborne quite a few times, believe it or not, even after some really tough losses, they still have a great heart. They are still playing hard, they're practicing hard, everyone's showing up to practice. So there is a change of culture out there. You never know, maybe everybody gets together on this year. I mentioned Robinson, maybe he can be the leader out there to really fire them up and pull off a surprise win against the Red Devils. As you said, they're winless as well. Maybe this could be the one that takes them back onto an even keel, and maybe another couple of wins down the road. But looking at the stats and comparing apples to apples, unfortunately, I'm going to say the Red Devils are going to win this one by at least a pair.
Yeah, Sweetwater is coached by former Chargers and NFL punter Brian Wagner. Running back Luciano Estapier is the team's leading rusher, and I've got the Red Devils winning this one. Well, that's going to do it. We're here at Retro Sports, and thanks to Matt Atkinson and the crew for making us feel welcome today, and thanks some of our other sponsors as well, Al's Sports Shop, Nicolosi's Italian Restaurant, Maracarillo's Italian Restaurant, and also American General Construction.
And let's not forget about our good friends at H12 Sports Academy.